Hello, and welcome back to Proverbs, a letter to my son. I'm excited about these lessons. I love this stuff in Proverbs. It's so rich. Today, we're going to look at Lesson 3, Part 1, and we'll be using the King James translation. Today, we'll be referencing Proverbs 1:7. It says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge." And we saw that half of the verse in Lesson 2, where we discussed what the fear of the Lord is, who the Lord is, and what biblical knowledge is. Today, and in the next two lessons, we're going to see the second half of the verse, "Fools despise wisdom and instruction," and we'll see that in Lesson 3. As we looked at before, Proverbs 1:7 presents two choices in life. We can choose the fear of the Lord and experience the blessings and gain that result when I follow God's way. That's Lesson 2. We looked at that already. And then we can choose to be a fool and live for the world and experience the hurts and losses that result when I demand my way. And that's Lesson 3. Now let's look at the second half of the verse again. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. As you will see, this Lesson 3 is divided into three parts. And the reason I did that is in Part 1, we're going to discuss two of the three fools in Proverbs. And then in Part 2, we'll discuss the third fool and show a summary of all the fools. And then in Part 3, we'll discuss wisdom and instruction, what wisdom is and how to acquire it. What is a fool? Do you know? Can you tell me what it is? Have you ever seen one? I'm sure you have, even if you didn't know it. But my question to you is, what is a fool? Do you know? I didn't before I started this study. I didn't have an idea. I read about it in the scriptures, but let's look at some things about a fool. Every fool will do either one or more of these following things. He'll do and say things that are hurtful, costly, or downright disastrous. That's just his nature. He will argue with anyone who disagrees with him. Get in an argument with one time, you'll find out that it's a lost cause. Number 3, he'll do what he wants even if it causes his premature death. Once he makes up his mind, you're not going to change him. He will make decisions based upon emotions rather than sound logic. A lot of our governmental people do that too. But he doesn't try to logic something out. It's how he feels about it. He will reject counsel. He feels that there's nothing wrong with what he does or says. And he lives for self and leaves God out of his life. Now, I must point out that a fool is someone who does these things on a regular basis. Someone who makes one wrong choice or engages in some stupid or hurtful activity one time is foolish. He's not a fool in the sense of this discussion. So these are things that a fool will do. Like I said, he doesn't do all of them, but he'll do one or more. Now I'd like to show you a chart as to where the fool falls in relation to other types of people. Let's look at it. Everything above the red line is good. Everything below the red line is not desirable. We look at a prudent man. What do we say prudent was? Someone who always considers the consequences of his choices, and if the results will be good and beneficial, he'll proceed. If they're hurtful or costly, he'll abstain. Well, that's the prudent man. What about the naive? Exactly the opposite. He doesn't consider the consequences of his choices, so he makes bad decisions with bad results. We don't want to be one of those. And then when we look at a wise man, he's prudent, but he has more wisdom than just prudence, and he makes the best decisions that produce the best results in every area of life and practice. And then the fool is least desirable. He's total opposite of the wise man. He thinks he's always right. Don't try to tell him anything. He knows all he thinks he needs, and then he goes out and makes bad decisions, not like the naive man who does it because he doesn't know, but the fool does it because he thinks he knows better. So the fool is not where we want to be. So that's a relationship between the four different classes of people. Now I'd like to show you in Proverbs there are 3 Hebrew words for fool, and we'll look at each one of those in turn. So let's look at those. I'm using the Strong's numbers so that you can go back and check Strong's and verify what I'm telling you. Strong's 03684 fool is mentioned 49 times in Proverbs. A summary of Strong's definition is one who only wants to have fun, is gullible, and is prone to make wrong decisions. All he wants to do is have fun and physical pleasure. That's fool number 1. Fool number 2, 0191 fool, mentioned 19 times in Proverbs. A summary of this fool is one who is morally corrupt and doesn't have the sense to know better. He doesn't care about laws, all this stuff. He's going to do whatever he wants to do. And then the 05036 fool, mentioned only 3 times in Proverbs, is one who is mean, selfish, and closed to reason. So these are the 3 types of fools we're going to talk about. Now, there are other fools in the Bible, but we're only going to deal with the ones that are mentioned in Proverbs. I hope you'll understand. Let's look now at the 03684 fool. Strong's defines him as fool, stupid fellow, dullard, simpleton, arrogant one. And then the Theological Word Book of the Old Testament defines him as the dull or obstinate one, referring not to mental deficiency, but to a propensity to make wrong choices. So let's sum that up in current day language. He wants to have fun and or experience physical pleasures. That's his goal in life. That's all he cares about. And he's gullible and makes decisions based upon emotions rather than sound logic. So let's look at each of these in turn. First, he wants to have fun and or experience physical pleasures. So we'll look at some verses now that deal with this. Ecclesiastes 7:2 says, "It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to heart." And then verse 4 says, "The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of myrrh." So what's it saying? The fool's philosophy is eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die. He doesn't consider the future, doesn't think about the fact that he's going to die and have to face eternity. So this is the fool, the 03684 fool. And then in verse 5, "It's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under the pot, so is the laughter of the fool." He just doesn't take life serious. Everything's a game to him. Everything's a party. He wants to have fun. He wants to get the physical pleasures he can get, and that's it. I'd like to give you a New Testament illustration of that. In Luke chapter 12, verse 16, let's read it together. "And he spake a parable unto them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do, because I have no room to bestow my fruits? And he said, This will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there will I bestow all my fruits and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, thou hast goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall these things be which thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasure for himself, and is not rich toward God." This guy only wanted to sit back and relax. He kept it all for himself. He wanted just to experience life at its best and didn't care about anybody else. And God said, that's a fool. This particular fool, 368 fool, doesn't care about the next guy. He cares about himself, and that's all. Let's look at some more things about this fool. He spends money on today and does not save for the future. Proverbs 21:20. "There is a treasure to be desired, and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but the foolish man spendeth it up." He doesn't save. He wants to have the fun today. Everything is today. Everything is right now. And then in Psalm 49:10-13, we read, "For he seeth the wise man die, likewise the fool and the brutish person both perish," or the stupid person. and leave their wealth to others. Their inward thought is that their houses shall continue forever, and their dwelling places to all generations. They call their lands after their own names. Nevertheless, man being in honor abideth not. He is like the beast that perisheth. And verse 13, this their way is folly, yet their prosperity approveth their sayings. Now, sometimes in the King James, the wording is a little difficult to understand. So I'm going to rephrase it in the words of a newer translation. It says, this their way is their folly, and of those after them who approve their words. Other fools approve of what they're doing. And that's all they do is approve each other. He is always looking for greener pastures. Wisdom is before him that hath understanding. Or let's read it. Wisdom is in the presence of him that hath understanding. But the eyes of a fool are in or on the ends of the earth. He's always looking for greener pastures. You know, I see this in folks that spend their money on the lottery. Most of the people that do that can't afford it. They give their money to buy tickets, and many of them, they can't afford to do it, yet they do it. And I say this, he who does not plan for the future will fail in the future. And this is exactly what's going to happen to this fool. He doesn't plan for the future, and then when the future comes, he's not going to have anything to show for it. And then what happens? He has to beg. And you know, you and I need to be careful to save and spend wisely so we have funds for the future when we grow older. What else do we know about this 0368 fool? He's gullible and makes decisions based upon emotions rather than sound logic. Let's see some verses about this. He has a distorted outlook on life. Proverbs 14:8, the wisdom of the prudent is to understand his way, but the folly of fools is deceit. Notice that the fools is marked as 03684 fool, but folly is 0200. The folly is not a fool. It is the results of what a fool does. And what happens is deceitful because they don't get the results they want, but they think it'll produce that. And then in Ecclesiastes 2:14, the wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walketh in darkness. He doesn't know where he's going. Whatever seems good today, whatever seems fun, that's where he goes. And doesn't consider the consequences of his choices and makes bad choices and then wonders why. The fool looks at life as he wishes it were instead of what it actually is. That's why he walks in darkness. Ecclesiastes 10:2-3. A wise man's heart is at his right hand, or directs him to the right. But the fool's heart is at his left, or directs him to the left. Yea, also, when he that is a fool walketh by the way, his wisdom faileth him, or his sense is lacking, and he saith, or demonstrates to everyone, that he is a fool. You look at a fool, it won't take long. You'll be able to tell what he is. And it's unfortunate, but that's his nature. I found it interesting that when someone trusts Christ as Savior, someone who's liberal and totally out in left field, and gets saved, born again, genuinely born again, while they were a liberal before, they become a staunch conservative because they start thinking with their mind instead of with their heart. So this is the fool, some things we want to see. What else can we see about the fool? Well, he disrespects his parents. Proverbs 10:1 says, the Proverbs of Solomon, a wise son maketh a father glad, but a foolish son is heaviness or grief to his mother. And then in Proverbs 17:21, he that begetteth a fool doeth it to his sorrow, and the father of a fool hath no joy. Now notice there are two different fools there. The first one is the 03684 fool, the one that just wants to have fun. It's sorrow to his parents, but there's no joy to the 05036 fool who's mean, cantankerous, and evil. Parents don't have any joy at all about that man. In Proverbs 30, verse 11, Agur is rebuking his two sons, Ithiel and Ucal, and he's trying to get them to see the error of their ways. He's showing them in this verse the heart attitude that is driving their attitudes and actions. And he says in verse 11, there's a generation or a kind of man that curseth his father, and doth not bless his mother. So his heart attitude is, I don't care about them. Let them go take a hike. And then in verse 17 of the same chapter, Augur is showing them what they need to see in order to correct their undesirable ways, because they definitely did not respect their parents. You'll see when we get there. It's a beautiful chapter, and I love the logic. In verse 30 it says, the eye that mocketh at his father, and despiseth to obey his mother, the ravens of the valley shall pluck it out, and the young eagles shall eat it. So what's he saying? He's saying, guys, listen, you keep disrespecting your parents. You keep running down mom and dad, and you're going to come to a quick and disastrous end. Wake up. Recognize the end of where you're going, because it won't be pretty. What else do we know about this fool? He gets angry easily. Proverbs 29:11 says, a fool uttereth all his mind, or loses his temper, but a wise man keepeth it in till afterwards. And then Proverbs 12, verse 16 says, a fool's wrath is presently known, or known at once, but a prudent man covereth shame, or conceals dishonor. The fool doesn't care. He's going to speak his mind no matter what happens. And he just tough luck. Whoever sees it, so he's just not going to be careful about that. Proverbs 29:9, if a wise man contendeth with a foolish man, whether he, that is the foolish man, rage or laugh, there's no rest. Don't bother arguing with a fool. You can't win the argument. They'll argue and argue and argue until you either agree with them or walk off in disgust. This is the fool. Ecclesiastes 7:9 says, be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. That's a hard attitude, and it just comes out. Therefore, because of this, Proverbs 22:24 says, make no friendship with an angry man, or a man given to anger. And with a furious man, or hot-tempered man, thou shalt not go, lest thou learn his ways and get a snare. So don't make friends, close friends, with someone who has an anger problem. Stay away. Let them go their way. They'll experience the hurts and losses that result, but there's no sense for you to experience those as a bystander or to become like him. What else about the fool? He takes great pleasure in committing wickedness. Proverbs 10:23 says, it is as sport to a fool to do mischief, but a man of understanding has wisdom. He thinks it's fun, and he wants to join in it any time he can. That's just his nature. Proverbs 13:19, the desire accomplished is sweet to the soul, but it's an abomination of fools to depart from evil. Proverbs 26:11, as a dog returneth to his vomit, so a fool returneth to his folly. He'll keep going back and back and back, and you can't change him. That's the way he is. The only way he can change is if the Lord changes his heart. What else about him? His speech is powerless for good. Proverbs 26:7, the legs of the lame are not equal, or better said, they're useless. So the legs of the lame are useless. So is a Proverbs in the mouth of fools. Their lifestyle totally invalidates everything they try to say that's good. They don't have the knowledge, understanding, or the reputation. Proverbs 26:9, as a thorn goeth up in the hand of a drunkard, so is a parable in the mouth of fools. So what's he saying there? A drunk man that's really drunk, doesn't feel anything. He can get a really big thorn briar in his hand, and he won't even know it. He won't feel it. So when we talk about the fool, speaking of Proverbs, just like the drunkard cannot feel the thorn, so the Proverbs is totally useless and out of order for the one who's the fool saying it. It doesn't affect anybody for good. A fool's lips enter into contention or strife, or bring strife, and his mouth calleth for strokes or blows. The way he talks is going to get someone angry at him, and he's going to get hurt. Proverbs 12:23, a prudent man concealeth knowledge, but the heart of the fools proclaims foolishness. He'll say whatever he wants, whenever he wants. Proverbs 23:9, speak not in the ears of a fool, for he will despise the wisdom of your words. So don't spend time around a fool. Don't try to correct him. Don't try to argue with him. Don't try to convince him. It's not going to work. You just need to let him go his way. What else? He'll make rash vows he does not keep. Let's read here. I find it interesting. In Ecclesiastes 5:1-7. Keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God, and be more ready to hear than to give the sacrifice of fools. Notice the sacrifice of fools is highlighted in red or magenta. For they consider not that they do evil. Be not rash with thy mouth, and let not thine heart be hasty to utter anything before God. For God is in heaven, and thou upon the earth. Therefore let thy words be few, for a dream cometh through a multitude of business, and a fool's voice is known by a multitude of words. When thou vowest a vow to God, defer not to pay it, for he hath no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou hast vowed. Better is it that thou should not vow, that thou should vow and not pay. Suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin, neither say thou before the angel that it was an error. Wherefore should God be angry at thy voice, and destroy the works of thy hands? For in a multitude of dreams and many words there's also divers vanities, but fear God. The fool makes rash vows. He likes to hear himself talk. He doesn't think it through. He moves with emotions, not with logic. So he makes a vow, but he doesn't intend to keep it. He just doesn't do it. He wants to hear himself talk. So in conclusion, for this 03684 fool, stay away from him. I like Proverbs 17:12. Let a bear robbed of her whelps meet a man rather than a fool in his folly. You don't want to get anywhere around a mother when her bear cubs, she feels are in danger. It'll kill the man. So this is the 03684 fool. Definitely we don't want to be there. Okay, fool number 2. That was fool number 1. So fool number 2 now. The 0191 fool. He's morally corrupt and doesn't have the sense to know better. What can we learn about him? The fool disregards moral, legal, and spiritual restraints. Psalm 107:17 says, fools, because of their transgression or their rebellious way, and because of their iniquities are afflicted. They're constantly having trouble because they're doing immoral things and having to pay the consequences for it. Jeremiah 4:22, for my people is foolish, and they have not known me. They are sootish. What's sootish? Well, basically it's stupid. They are stupid children, and they have none understanding. They are wise to do evil, but to do good they have no knowledge. They don't know how, this fool doesn't know how to do good. All he knows to do is what comes naturally. He can enjoy his sin, the physical illicit pleasures, whatever it is. His morals are shot. Let's look at an illustration. In 2 Samuel 13:1, we read, and it came to pass after this that Absalom, the son of David, had a fair sister whose name was Tamar. And Amnon, the son of David, loved her. And Amnon was so vexed that he fell sick for his sister, for she was a virgin. And Amnon thought it hard to do anything to her. So what's happening here? He wanted to have sexual relations with his sister. He knew it wasn't right, but he still wanted to have his fun. And then he wanted it so badly it made him sick. Well, his cousin came to him and said, what's going on? Amnon told him, and his cousin said, well, go to your dad, King David, and ask to have Tamar bring food to your room because you're not feeling well, and she can feed you the food. Then you can do what you want then. So he did that, and David was reluctant, but he said, okay. So, and when she brought them, that is the food, unto him to eat, he took a hold of her and said, come lie with me, my sister. And she answered him, nay, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Do not thou this folly. And I, whither shall I cause my shame to go? As for thee, Thou shalt be as one of the fools in Israel. Now therefore I pray thee, speak unto the king, and he will not withhold me from thee. Howbeit, he would not hearken unto her. He wanted the sex so bad he wouldn't listen. But being stronger than her, he forced her, and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that his hatred wherewith he hated her was greater than the love wherewith he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, Arise and go. In other words, get out of my house. So here's Amnon. He wanted to have his fun. He was morally corrupt. He didn't know, though, that it would cost him his life, because a year or so later, Absalom got even with Amnon for raping his sister, and he killed Amnon. Amnon lost his life over that. He didn't consider the consequences. He just wanted to have his fun. What else do we know about this fool, this 0191 fool? A fool's continual talking will generate his ruin. Proverbs 10:10. He that winketh with the eye causeth sorrow, but a prating fool shall fall. Proverbs 10:8. The wise in heart will receive commands, but a prating fool shall fall. What does it mean, prating? Any idea? Well, it means babbling, a babbling fool. So this babbling fool is going to come to ruin. Now, what does it mean, babbling? A paraphrase of the dictionary definition is to talk and talk and talk and talk about things of no importance. They just talk and talk. No, they like to hear themselves talk. And then in verse 14 of the same chapter, wise men lay up knowledge, but the mouth of the foolish is near destruction, or ruin is at hand. Now, what's this about ruin? What does it mean to come to ruin? According to Strong's Concordance, it means to be thrust down, to be thrust away, to be thrust down, to be cast aside. In essence, it means to be discarded like a piece of garbage. So this kind of fool is going to come to that kind of a ruin. His life will end in tragedy. It's unfortunate, but it'll happen. Notice, a fool might appear wise if he'd ever stopped talking. Proverbs 17:28. Even a fool, when he holdeth his peace, is counted wise, and he that shutteth his lips is esteemed a man of understanding. In other words, if a fool would ever stop talking, he'd be considered wise. But is he going to do that? No. He'll talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. What else about a fool? A fool will argue with anyone, anytime. Proverbs 20, verse 3 says, It is an honor for a man to cease from strife, but every fool will be meddling. What else? Proverbs 29:9. If a wise man contendeth with a foolish, whether the fool rage or laugh, there is no rest. So don't argue with him. Just like the 03684 fool, he'll argue, but he'll be glad to do it, glad to join it, even if he has nothing to do with it. Proverbs 17:14. The beginning of strife is as when one letteth out water. Therefore leave off contention before it meddleth or gets out of control. When you see an argument starting, step aside, get away. Don't be part of it. He can't argue with himself. If you're not there to argue, then you won't be involved in it. Proverbs 27:3 says, A stone is heavy, and sand is weighty, but a fool's wrath or his provocation is heavier than them both. When I look at the Hebrew definition for wrath there, it's talking more about provocation. In other words, he's going to talk and provoke you to anger. He's going to keep prodding and provoking. He thinks it's fun. So just don't argue with him. What else? A fool either cannot or will not control his temper. Job chapter 5, verses 1-5. Job is defending himself here, and he says, Call now, if there be any that will answer thee, and to which of the saints wilt thou turn? For wrath killeth the foolish man. Notice 0191. And envy slayeth the silly one. For I've seen the foolish taking root, but suddenly I cursed his habitation. His children are far from safety, and they are crushed in the gate. Neither is there any to deliver them. Whose harvest the hungry eateth up, and taketh it even out of thorns. The robber swalloweth up their substance. In other words, they're going to lose everything. And Job thought, I can't stand this guy. I hate the fact that he's even prospering at all, even for a little while. But notice, wrath killeth the foolish. His anger kills the foolish. And then in Proverbs 12:16, a fool's wrath is presently known, but a prudent man covereth shame, or he conceals his dishonor. The fool doesn't care. He doesn't care. He doesn't care what you think of him. He doesn't care what you want. All he's thinking about is me and what I want, and he'll say and do things, whatever he wants to do, without considering the next person. So we've looked at both the 0368 fool, fool number 1, and we've looked at the 0191 fool, the fool with no moral restraints. These are fools 1 and 2. When we look at lesson 3, part 2, we'll look at the third fool, the 05036 fool, and then we'll do a summary of all the fools together. I hope you'll join me in lesson 2. I'm enjoying this. I didn't know this before I started studying, but it's rich stuff. So join me, please, in the next lesson, lesson 3, part 2. I hope you'll join me, and I'll look for you there. Thank you.